We're going to call this to order and get started. So I'm going to start with the roll call. When I call your name, there is one wrinkle under the OMA now. You have to state the location where you are. So that would be city and state or township or village, whatever. So when I call your name, please say here and where you are located. Commissioner Pressel.
Here, and I'm in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Commissioner Weiner.
Present, Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Commissioner Harwood.
Here, Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Commissioner Hewitt.
Here, Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Commissioner Janovich.
Ann Arbor, Michigan, here.
And we have a quorum. So before we get to business, I'll just go over the background of the body. Commissioner Janovich, and am I saying your name correctly?
Not a CH, just a Janovic.
Janovic, okay.
Yep.
Is new, so for her benefit as much as anyone's, I will just talk a little bit about the LOCC role. LOCC is a statutorily authorized body. There's a state statute, and then we have a local ordinance implementing it. Its role is to determine the salaries of the mayor and council. It meets every odd-numbered year. It meets for no more than 15 session days, and it has to conclude its business within 45 days of the first meeting. So the clock has started ticking now, and since there's not 45 days left in the year, we have to wrap this up by the end of the year. Once the commission makes its determination of the salaries, it's transmitted to the council, and it becomes effective unless council by resolution, by 2/3 resolution, adopts a resolution to reject the determination. So it would have to be rejected by 8 out of the 11 council members. And so that's pretty much it for that. Does anybody have any questions about the process? Seeing none, we will move on. We do need to elect a chair for this session. I think Commissioner Weiner was chair last time. Is that right?
I think that's right.
Okay. So if anybody's interested, it's relatively light work. You simply introduce agenda items, which I will assist with. You ask for motions to move a resolution and seconds, and you direct the discussion. You basically call on people and make sure the discussion is on track. So is anybody would like to volunteer and or then be nominated by somebody? Interest or experience? And if Brian wants to keep doing it, that's fine too. I'm seeing nobody.
If no one's willing to do it, I will do it. Since I did it last time, I guess prefer if someone else would, but if no one else steps forward.
I'm happy to be the chair if you prefer to not do it.
Fantastic.
All right. Can I get a nomination from someone else?
So moved.
And a second?
Or
Okay. All in favor? Say aye.
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 All opposed? It is done. So, Chair Janovic, the next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
Can I get a motion for approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Support?
Second.
I'll second.
All in favor of approving the agenda?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Do we need to do individual voting by name?
For these, if it's a voice vote and there's no opposed, then we should be fine.
Okay. All opposed? And the approval of the agenda passes. Next, we have public comment, 3 minutes per speaker. Do we have anyone from the public here? I don't see anyone.
At the participant screen, I see no one. There is a delay of maybe 30 seconds between this, what we're seeing, and what's on the TV. So let's give about a minute for folks to call in. If anyone is watching and would like to comment, there should be a phone number and meeting ID on the screen. You can call that phone number and enter the meeting ID, and then you will show up on my screen. So we'll give just a minute for folks to do that if they would like. I'll also point out for anyone watching, if there's a desire to submit written comments, they can be emailed to me. The contact information is on the city webpage under non-regularly scheduled or electronic meetings. And I do not see anyone, so I think we can move on.
All right. The next item on the agenda is approval of minutes. Did everyone receive the minutes from the June 17, 2019 meeting? Okay, looks like everyone is okay with that.
Chris, are you willing to share?
I can share them, yeah, if you would like.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, can everyone see this one?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So let's scroll down. So a reminder, this is the last meeting. This was I believe, the third meeting of that year. The body had requested a change to the resolution, which I prepared. So it was a pretty quick meeting.
Yes. That's correct.
And I'll scroll down to the final. Does anybody need to see any more of this?
No, I don't. Can I get a motion for approval of the minutes from the June 17, 2019 meeting?
So moved.
Support.
All in favor of approval of the meeting minutes from the June 17, 2019 meeting? Say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed? The approval of the June 2017, 2019 meeting minutes passes. And the next item on our agenda is the commission business. I have a feeling that Chris maybe has an intro to this.
Yes. So I will share again. So just to go through a little bit of the background of this, let's see, what was the previous? So the prior session in 2019, the body looked at the CPI change and the non-union wage change and did an average of those to determine the increase in the salaries. In addition, there was also a request for information from the council members as to how much time they were spending on their duties. And a survey was done. And based on that, the LOCC decided to set the salaries for the council members at 50% of the mayor's salary, which was an increase from where they were. Based on that decision last time, this draft resolution this year does the same thing, sets it at 50% of the mayor's salary for the council members' salaries, and then determines the mayor's salary based on an average of the CPI for the previous year. Would folks like me to go through the background materials that were provided? Would that be helpful?
No, Chris, I do have a question. I do not recall from 2 years ago. Did the council accept these pay raises?
They did. I don't recall if a resolution was even introduced to reject, but it did. The pay raises did go through.
Okay. Being on the, I think most of us were on the committee last year, and I think we did a pretty exhaustive examination. And I am comfortable using the same formula that we used 2 years ago. But obviously that's just my own opinion.
So then I'll move to the draft. So what we have, and we had met earlier in the year.
If I might, Chris, I was thinking it might be helpful for Elizabeth's sake to recap a little more of the history. And you can tell me otherwise, Elizabeth. But basically, the way that we got to the last resolution was that, as you know, the commission meets every 2 years. And so in not in 2019, but in 2017, we had made some decisions about how to calculate increases that didn't necessarily rely on, didn't is correct, but that didn't rely on what's being done in Albion or, Augusta or any place like that. We were less concerned about what any other city in Michigan, or for that matter, the United States, pays their people, because every city has its own set of, it's got its own standard of living. It's got its own amounts of time. Like we have part-time people, some people have full-time people, and so forth. And so that's where we got the first decision, was to use that combined CPI and, I hope I'm saying this right, cost of living, anyhow, using the union wage. So that's where we got the decision to set increases at that percentage. Basically, once any increases had been calculated to the union schedule and et cetera, we decided that that was probably the safest way to go. And we reiterated that in 2019, although, as Chris pointed out to us then, every 2 years, it's a different thing. We have the commissioners coming together. There's no necessary precedent, and you certainly can't bind future commission decisions. So that was part one. That's how we got to that percentage. How we got to the 50% or no less than 50% for the council members was that we realized, first of all, that the mayor, he is a council person just like anybody else, he or she, but the position has traditionally been paid more than the council members. What we were finding was that when we applied the percentage of increase that we were recommending, that actually the gap was increasing mathematically between what the mayor was getting, what the council people were getting, because when you increase 2 or 3% of $45,000, that's a bigger increase than if you increase a 3% on the $15,000. So that's where we got the idea of making sure that council members would be paid no less than 50% of what the mayor was getting paid. Now, the other factor to know about is that if our recommendation is accepted, it's accepted as to all portions. So there's no distinction. You can't say, yes, we want the council members' salaries increased, but we don't want the mayor's salary increased. It's a package deal. So that's the thinking that went into the no less than 50%. And I think I've said enough, but I just wanted you to know that because you had some questions as a new person, and I hope that answers some of them.
Yeah, that definitely does. It is helpful for me to understand that the way it's being done now is set more along the lines of what is good for Ann Arbor rather than what maybe is good for another town. I'm a little like, why are we using the 20? Oh, because what's the 2021% change in city non-union employee compensation?
So there was 3%, and this was one item I wanted to mention to you all. We switched, maybe it was in 2017. Prior to that, it had been on a calendar year that the salaries would change. We switched to changing it on the fiscal year, which makes a lot more sense for the budget for the city. So we are now doing July to July, which means, so if you wanted to capture the 2021 inflation to some extent, which we're not doing with this draft because it's based on 2020, one option would be to go to look at the fiscal year change in inflation. And if you look at that, and I did a quick draft, which I'll just show you here. If you did that, July to July, you'll see you're going to capture some of the inflation this year, which is much higher, obviously, than it was previously, as we all know. So this would be one other option in order to capture, more of the 2-year span than we had previously done, to do the fiscal year change in inflation, which unfortunately Bureau of Labor and Statistics doesn't publish that as a separate sheet. You have to kind of just you have to go into the data and look at the numbers. But then if you just averaged the 4 of them, you would come up with 2.4%, which reflects the average of the years. So that's another option I wanted to put out there for you if you thought that was going to be more helpful than just doing the 2020.
Chris, did you, that CPI change from July 2020 to July 2021?
Mm-hmm.
Is that pulled from the Bureau of Labor Statistics?
Yep, it's the CPI-U, which is the urban wage,
Okay,
which I think we decided previously was most comparable for Ann Arbor.
Yep.
Can you also clarify, Chris? I can't remember, since we do this every 2 years, would whatever percentage we determine, then let's say it's 3%, would the 3% occur in each of the 2 years? So the second year would have a 3% increase over what we're approving for the upcoming year?
Yeah, you can structure it any way you want. It was chosen to do that way with an average and then keep it the same for both years, just for simplicity's sake.
Okay.
So
okay.
it's a rough approximation.
Yeah.
But you can do whatever you want.
Okay.
If we stuck to the, for lack of a better word, formula or framework that we agreed upon last time, this change in your example here would be to reset what we have in our current draft resolution for 2023 to the new numbers. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, the resolution you have before you is not this, so you'd have to amend it to make it this if you wanted to change it to that.
Okay, thank you.
So I would like to say this seems more accurate to me, especially since it's being applied over a 2-year span and not just a 1-year span. It already seems, the council members' salaries already seem low to me anyway, based on the amount of work that they do. And I think we are all aware that they do an incredible amount of work, especially, when you see people just constantly out there and communicating with their constituents and really, really working hard. It certainly doesn't feel like a part-time job to me. I don't know how much, and I know that you've stayed away from looking at other cities, but when I was looking through all of the data that Chris provided, I noticed that like Lansing seemed like a good comparable city. I don't know how much work the Lansing City Council members are doing compared to what our City Council members are doing, but it's a similar population, but they have 13 fewer meetings, and they're at 25,308.19. I think I think it's a good idea to keep that kind of, I like the idea of the council members being half of the mayor's salary, but I'm also wondering if maybe we're aiming a little low based on the amount of work that the council members are doing.
I think we had a similar discussion at our last meeting, and I can't remember exactly the answer to this. So Chris, you could help out. When we had that conversation, was there some discrepancy in the way that other city councils are set up as far as they were set as being employees or had a set pay, where Ann Arbor was maybe not? Am I remembering that correct, or do I have maybe I'm misremembering that?
You know,
I know there was a difference between the mayors, right? Some were like full-time mayors, some were part-time, but I can't remember about the city council members.
There's that. There's whether the mayor is full or part-time is one aspect. Also, whether it's the mayor is the chief executive or not. So in Ann Arbor, the mayor is not the chief executive. That's by the city administrator. So that when you look at those salaries for various cities and the mayor's, in the 130s, that's probably a chief executive mayor. The council members, I don't know if there's any real difference. I think they all kind of serve the same function, but the way that the salaries are set in various communities may be completely different. Some may not allow any compensation. Some, may have a local officers compensation commission. Some may have a fixed compensation. You see a few of them that are like $5 or whatever. So, but I don't think there was any. I don't think the duties are necessarily any different. I would have to check whether or not they are specifically called out as part-time or full-time. I suspect that a city like Detroit might have a full-time role, whether it's stated or not in the charter or anything. I suspect a job in Detroit would take most of your time.
Yeah, thanks. I may have just kind of mixed up those two between the mayor and the city council. 2 years between meetings is a long time. So, thank you.
And we can always look in if you need more information. If you want to look into Lansing and what their council members do and how it's structured, we can do that as well.
Well, I'm a bit more of an incrementalist. I do appreciate the sentiment raised, and I do appreciate the work that our mayor and city council undertake. I guess my inclination is, given the current inflationary dynamic, rather than using this kind of the blended CPI and non-union wage increase for the 2 years, I guess my gut reaction would be to use the July 20 to July 2021 CPI and non-union wage increase. So the 5.4% and the 3%, which would then give it a 4.2% increase. So it would acknowledge that I think inflation is going to be here for at least a bit, rather than it would, greatly reduce the percentage increase in the upcoming 2 years if we did the blended for these 2 years. So I guess my suggestion would be to go with accept the formula we've used in the past, but just the most recent year for CPI and non-union wage increase.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with that. Obviously, if you look at the numbers, there's pretty dramatic change between the 1920 versus the 2021. Obviously, the result of the pandemic.
Mhm.
We certainly have experienced that inflation now, and you say it does not look like it's going to be slowing down soon. So I don't have a problem if we want to just use the 2021 blended number, which you say would come out to 4.2.
Mhm.
So here are my thoughts on that. I think that as long as our recommendation makes sense, it will receive the attention it deserves from the city council members, who are, after all, the ones being paid. And if they decide that we're over the top, they will do as has been done in the past, which is to reject it. So we can certainly go for the higher number. The questions that I have, and I'm kind of two minds about this, are the last 2 years have been odd years. And as the cost of living has gone up, so has the cost of conducting government. At least I assume so. And I am concerned about causing too much of an increase into city expenses under the circumstances, although, you know, some people think of it as a drop in the bucket. On the other hand, and before I get to the other hand, I have never heard from any city council member or the mayor that they wanted a raise. They will accept it or not, but none of these folks are in it for the money. We are very blessed with people who do not look at this as a source of necessary income. On the other hand, one of our goals is to encourage people who might find it challenging not to be compensated adequately for the work that they do to choose to run. So those are my back and forth thoughts. To the extent that it actually does, more than theoretically perhaps, serve as an incentive for people to include themselves in the running instead of excluding themselves because it is, you know, it's a position without benefits. And sometimes those extra couple of $1,000 make a difference between being able to get by and not to get by. Because right now it's still true that the people who tend to run are people who are well heeled enough so that they don't need the money. So those are my thoughts. I've straddled the middle quite nicely, I think.
Well, and to add to probably to the confusion, although I certainly just made the argument that we should just look at the last year, another thought is that with a raise of 4.2%, we may be sending a message in future union negotiations that this is an acceptable wage increase. And, you know, that's something else I think we at least should keep in mind, that although this is a small amount of money, if this were applied throughout to all city employees, that would be quite a different amount of money.
I have another question that I think is going to inform maybe my opinion on it. I agree with changing that CPI time frame from the July to July to match that fiscal year that we're talking about. But on the just overall general picture of our recommendations from last time in that draft, how do those numbers affect or get put into the budget for the city for out years? In other words, they see our kind of our draft for fiscal 2022 and 2023 from our last resolution. Do those get then kind of added into that budget for what they're planning for those out years?
Yes. So the budget is developed, you know, pretty much, well, it's developed all the time, but in earnest, it begins kind of at the beginning of the calendar year. So the budget for FY 2023 will start next January, and this determination will be in at that point, so they'll be able to factor it in.
Yeah. Okay. So in that respect, kind of like back to what Roger was saying about maybe changing those too much or outside of any, I think he was talking in context of just using the CPI framework. What we have now is and the half of the mayor's salary, but I think if you go any too far beyond that, even to Elizabeth's point of trying to kind of get up to other city council salaries, that might be too big of a jump. Just from, at least if I'm like looking at a budget saying, what do we have to work with? You're talking about, what do we say, 4% increase or thereabouts on the CPI. And if you look at the October numbers for CPI, that was already at 6.2 or something on a year-over-year basis. So, you know, I'm not to say that's what it will be in 2 years when we meet again, but those are pretty substantial increases on a percentage basis. And if inflation happens to go the other way during the course of those 2 years, I don't think that we're necessarily locked into having to reduce these numbers. Kind of to your point, Elizabeth, that way you might get a little bit of catch up, you know, but not take the step back. I think that we were using this more as like a framework, not necessarily that had to be set in stone when we talked 2 years ago. And then that way we could make adjustments if we saw fit. So I think I'm with the camp that says kind of use this revised CPI dates from July 2020 to July 2021 to match fiscal years, but to keep that formula that we had. And I think the unions have, I mean, back to what Roger was saying, the unions have their own negotiations and what they're looking at. And I think they're probably looking more at what comparable city employees working full time are getting paid and the benefits that accrue to them in those negotiations, rather than the city council members. Maybe more so to the mayor, but I would think less to the city council.
I would agree with that. I do think that in a certain sense, what we do is a little bit of a vacuum because there aren't any real comparables, and union jobs have benefits that this job does not. It did occur to me, one other fact that I remember from 2 years ago that was striking is that when we solicited information from the city council members and the mayor as to what their estimated hours were, the interesting part was I actually believe that most of them underestimated the hours that they put in. But the range, when you discarded the one that was over 200 hours a month and the one that was under 60 a month, and again, these are just estimates that people tossed out, everybody fell within 60 to 180 hours a month. And when you average that, that's 120 hours, which probably is accurate, at least for the people who underestimated. And when you think about 120 hours per month, most months aren't actually 4 weeks, but if you describe full-time work as 40 hours per week, that's 160 hours in a month. And you have people with an average of 120 hours that they're putting in every month on a part-time job. This is not a half-time job. This is a more than half-time job. So, you know, it's one of the reasons I feel pretty committed to seeing to it that people's commitments are honored, even if, again, they might choose to decide, you know, not this year. We can always address it in 2 years. I want to say also that in the years that I was not on this commission, but through the 2000s, I think that there were, because of, you know, economic situation, there were several times when the council denied itself increases, probably 3 times out of 4, if that's possible. So we were kind of playing catch up by the time we got to 2017.
Mm-hmm. Elizabeth, I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Well, you know, I think that it is important to think about, obviously, the impact on the budget. My kind of gut reaction to it, like I said before, is that it seems like because this is not really a part-time job for the council members, or the mayor for that matter, it's a little low. But I think that going with the 5.4%, I don't know. Actually, you know what? Does anyone know what the city non-union benefits are? Are they more? Do they exist, or
Yes,
how are they in comparison to any benefits that the city council members might have?
council members get no benefits.
But non-union city council non-union city employees get benefits that are not uncomparable to union benefits. Is that right? I mean, you try and keep them a little bit. Not sure about this, but I know that Washtenaw County does. With the county, what the chief union gets, the non-union employees typically get as well. Is that true of the city or not?
Yeah,
Well, I can take this one. Yeah. So our fringe benefits, if that helps, is about 33%. So if you take salary, it's about an additional 33% in benefits. They have been comparable, I would say, over the last couple of years, though, because as an attempt to stabilize the budget, non-union hasn't been receiving the same increases or benefits that the unions have. And we have a vaccine mandate, which has also increased some benefits for unions and not non-union, because we've negotiated the mandate with the unions.
We're taking into account the non-union wage change as well. I know your question was about benefits, Elizabeth, but I mean, when you have one set of people who have no benefits whatsoever and their salaries are at the whim of people like ourselves, they really are in a separate category.
Right. I'm just wondering if it kind of unbalances the scale, so to speak, to add in something that is really not comparable. Because if you're getting a 3% wage change, but you also have 33% of your salary and benefits, you have more than a leg up on a person who doesn't have 33% of their salary in benefits.
Well, that's a good point.
Can I get just a point of clarification? So the non-union city employees, did you say they do get benefits, but the city council members do not get benefits? Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that's because the city council members are not technically employees of the city?
Correct. They're not employees.
Okay. I just want to make sure I understood that correctly. And then the union, that 30% you were talking about, that's for the union employees, or is that part of the salary of the non-union employees?
It's an average across all our employee groups is about 33%. Like if I'm paid $10, you add on, $3.30 to that, because our compensation, our benefits package is worth about 33%.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
What would, go ahead, Eddie.
I'm sorry, that just went back kind of to that very first question I was asking about whether the city council members were like employees or not, or full-time or part-time. I think that might have been kind of in my head from a conversation we were having around the similar topic at our last meeting.
I believe if they're being paid, they're an employee, but I think by law, they're prohibited from getting benefits. Elected officials are. That's my understanding anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, thank you.
So I guess to fully answer the question about what I think, I'm wondering if we are applying the non-union wage change. Maybe it's not really and maybe it's skewing the accuracy of what we're trying to do, which is give people a little more money and make this a position that is palatable for and possible for people who don't have a very nice, well-paying job otherwise. And if that really is going to be part of the resolution, that we want to make this, we want to open these positions up for people who, aren't financially in a position to spend 30 hours a week on a job that pays them less than $25,000 a year. Maybe we should be increasing it just by the fiscal year 2020 CPI change.
So that would be are you looking then at like that 5.4%, Elizabeth?
Yes.
Okay. And are you saying that because then that extra the extra amount is kind of making up for the cost of benefits that the city council is not getting, or just in general it helps increase the amount more?
I don't know that there's a way that we could possibly make up for the lack of 33% in benefits. That seems like maybe. I think that if we made that proposal, I think the city council would shoot it down.
Yes.
Kind of like what Juliet was saying. I think that that's a thing that would not be in anyone's best interest. But maybe taking small bites of the apple just to give a little bit of an increase. If that 5.4% is the CPI for 2020 to 2021, then maybe that is an appropriate increase. It's not a bridge too far. And I don't think that we could do anything to make up for the 33% of benefits. That would be a lot of money.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I was just kind of trying to figure out, because my only concern would be so we had a kind of an unusually high CPI year over year, and we'll continue the next month or so, and maybe even the first quarter of next year. And then after that, it's gonna more likely than not tail off. The percentage increases, if there are, they likely won't be as big, right? So I guess if we kind of get rid of that wage increase that's built into the non-union employees in this framework, and CPI goes to, let's say, 1%, but then employees' wages are 3 or 4% increase those out years, are we going back to then kind of, which is fine, I'm not saying that it's not okay, but then would the idea be to kind of go back and look at the framework again, kind of change that? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, well, we don't have, if we make a set in stone, okay, we're always going to use the CPI. I don't know that I would suggest that. I would say that generally, anything under a 3% increase in wage for the year is really low. I mean, it's really it turns into such an insignificant amount of money for a person. That I don't know if it would be right to go, to go much below that in the future. But I think that's maybe a future discussion to have. And I wouldn't suggest setting this in stone. Like, I guess what I'm thinking is that the next, the last couple of years have been very strange, and the workload for people has been, the learning curve has been steep, and the workload has been hard. It's been harder in general. So I don't know, but I'm open to certainly to other ideas about it. I keep going back to these folks are not doing a part-time job.
Listening to all this and looking at the numbers, if you use the formula we did in the past, shows it's a 2.4% increase. If we just take the 2021 numbers, it's a 4.2% increase. That difference comes out to about $427 a year difference between the two. I don't think that's going to have any impact on who runs or who doesn't run for council. If we really want to attract a broader group to council, we'd have to dramatically increase the wages for the amount of hours they're putting in. These people are doing it because they want to do it. And I don't think the money is that important. I think symbolically, it'd be better to keep with the average of the 2 years as we've done in the past at 4.2, because it sends a message of fiscal responsibility to the rest of the city employees that do have a huge impact financially on the city budget. So yeah, we are in a strange situation. Yeah, there's been a big jump in inflation. It probably won't continue. Probably may not even continue by the time the people start receiving these. But the difference between taking 2 years versus 1 year's average is not enough money to make a difference really to probably anybody over the course of 2 years. So I guess where I'm coming down is I would support keeping the formula the way we did it 2 years ago.
Which would be the average, Roger, of the four percentages over the 2 years? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yes, that would be the average of the 2 years. If you're looking at the screen there, the top of that second page, average percentage change is 2.4%. Versus if we did just the 2020-21, it would be 4.2%. At this level, I don't think that amount of money is going to have any impact on the individuals who are on council or may be considering running for council.
I'm kind of inclined to agree at this point, although Elizabeth, my sympathies do lie with at least increasing the city council members' salaries. Just not disrespect to the mayor, but it's a lot of money that he gets. And we are, if we continue to do what we did from 2 years ago, we are pegging the city council members' salaries to his. And so they aren't going to actually get, we're going to increase his salary by whatever percentage we choose, and then they get half of that. So they do get slightly more, a slightly higher increase than what it looks like when we set the percent change. But yes, you're right, Roger, doing the math always helps put things in perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my next question is, if we all know that we're not really making a change that would allow a person that would broaden the spectrum of people who would be able to take the jobs, if that needs to be removed from the resolution. I mean, if that goal is not being met by the resolution, then does that need to be removed from it? Or is it just more of a hope? Like, is it worded like a goal?
And this is the exact language from last year, so whatever changes you would like to make, we can certainly do.
It is a fair question. I will tell you that people are self-selecting for city council. And I did actually support someone in my neck of the woods that had a much lower income than his competitors. But it didn't make any difference to him. What people were getting paid was not what mattered. What mattered was whether he thought he could make a difference, whether he thought his views would be of assistance to the government. And so we want to be more inclusive. We look at ourselves and we recognize that the people who serve on council tend to be drawn from relatively well-to-do sections of the city. But we're kind of making a stab when we say, well, we want it to be more appealing to people for whom the financial incentive could make it or break it. I think, in fact, the financial incentive is probably the last on the list of considerations in reality. I've just never heard anybody say, yeah, if they paid another $2,000 or $3,000, I'm in. Because really, it isn't just the service on city council, which I think appeals to a lot of people. It's the fact that you have to run, you have to get support, you have to get financial support. And there are a lot of city politics that, determine whether or not you're in or otherwise. So it really has to do more with what encourages people to throw their hats in the ring to begin with. Yeah. I wouldn't take it out because it is a hope that we have, but I don't know there's any way to prove that it would make a difference, is what I'm saying.
Well, I mean, I see it does say wish.
Yes.
So I suppose that does indicate a hope.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. For myself personally, I think it would be great if it was more money. I think to your point, Elizabeth, so that it's more of like a wage of a full-time job. But to Julie's point, well, two things. One, to Julie's point is, a lot of people that are running for council aren't doing it just because of that. Granted, I know that there's probably some people that don't run because of that. But from the financial perspective of it, I don't think that I can, as a commissioner, recommend that we increase it all the way up to that level without knowing what kind of leeway we have in the budget, or what, I mean, you talk about basically like doubling I know you're not giving that number, but if you got up to that number of like what would be a full-time wage for that number of hours, you'd be up there pretty good. And I don't think that I feel comfortable doing that without seeing, hey, from the city staff, like, yeah, look, here's a budget. You got this much room to go. If you want to, go up there and it works, knock yourself out. But just from, maybe that's because I'm a business owner and I know that I work in a different world, right? Where like I have a budget, and that might be part of it. But at the same time, I wish I could pay my employees more as well. And if I could, I would. And maybe that's for next time, or maybe Chris can get us that, but I'm pretty sure it sounds like the budget's set. So, and obviously can change. My personal feeling is I don't feel comfortable bumping it up that high, but certainly having this framework and then at least moving it up with CPI plus or with our formula, I think is a good start. And the wish and hope that we can get up there would be great. Maybe we can one day. Maybe it'll be next year. Who knows? Or the following year. I guess it would be 2 years from now.
I just wanted to be clear. The budget is not set yet. The city administrator still would be developing it at this point. And it would be set by the city administrator, his recommended budget, and then it goes to council in, I can't remember when it is, February or March or April. And then the council has the ability to then change it. But city administrator would take whatever determination was made by the LOCC now and that would be incorporated into the budget. So the money would be there. There would be, that much less money for the other things.
Gotcha.
It's not a problem to get it into the budget, I guess.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. So we're kind of going backwards. Instead of starting from the budget, going down and working our way into that budget line. We're kind of saying, here's what we want to spend, work it into our overall budget that you're working on. Is that how I understand it?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a fact for them that council salaries exist, and so whatever they are, that goes in the budget, and then you work around it.
So if we say let's double, just throwing out a number, let's just double the amount as our recommendation, then the city administrator says, okay, now I'm going to double that amount in the budget for those salaries. Is that even before the city council
Yes.
Votes? Okay, all right.
Yep. That's in his recommended. It would be in his recommended budget.
Gotcha. Okay,
Which,
thank you.
If the council does not adopt, would then become the budget. So that's the fallback. If council has the ability to look at the budget and change things, but if they can't agree and don't adopt a final budget, the city administrator's budget is the default, and it goes into effect.
Okay. I hope that cleared it up for everybody else like it did for me.
I think we need to also consider that if we were to suggest an increase that this ends up being a political decision on the part of sitting city council members. And I think if we come in with too large of a proposed increase, it will make it very difficult for them politically to let it slide, basically let it become approved. So, and I just thinking personally, I think if we were to recommend something over 5%, frankly, I think we run the risk that politically it becomes tough for council members to accept what it is that we're recommending. So I just want to throw that into the mix, that this is ultimately a political decision as well, and council members need to assess, how large of an increase they're willing to accept before they feel like the political pressure is there for them to reject the increase that we're recommending.
What if we were to recommend a lower percentage and increase the council member salaries, increase that 50% number to maybe 55%, and use that as the kind of the standard?
That's a good question. Does anybody remember how we came up with the 50% number of the mayor's salary? Was that maybe based on that survey we did of hours spent?
No, again, it had to do with the fact that when we were dealing with a across the board standard percentage increase, whatever it was, that it wound up widening the gap between the mayor's salary and the city council members rather than narrowing it or even keeping it the same, because as I said earlier, 3% increase to $45,000 is substantially more than a 3% increase to $15,000. And I'm just pulling numbers out here, but what we were trying to do was make sure that the gap didn't widen more than 50%. So in fact, whatever increase in whatever percentage increase we would give the mayor, it actually would have a slightly higher effect on the city council people. I think that some of us are troubled, again, no slam against the mayor. I think some of us are troubled about the gap between the city council members and the mayor, precisely because the mayor is himself a city council person, and what he does over and above being a city council person is, I don't know, I don't want to say largely honorific, because he may be doing things that go beyond that. But I personally would support very strongly any mechanism by which we could increase the relative pay of the city council members, just because I think that we're marching toward $50,000 for the mayor eventually. And I don't care if we go there, but I kind of like to see the city council pace catch up. We have to come up with a rationale that is acceptable to people.
Well,
of fairness, I suppose.
Hearing this, could I suggest we keep our formula for determining the percentage increase, which would be come out to the 2.4%. But we increase the city council percentage of the mayors from 50% to 55%.
I could back that.
That makes me feel a lot more comfortable with kind of the direction this is headed and supporting what we're trying to achieve. That wish. You know, I think that that seems like it's more in line with supporting what we're actually trying to achieve.
In which case, what we want to build into our resolution is this specific goal, that we recognize the disparity, we have to say it nicely, but disparity between what the city council members are getting paid and what the mayor's getting paid as kind of the city council person with an extra crown. And that we want to narrow that gap because we see that as inequitable. However we phrase it, I think that needs to be part of the resolution because then it explains why we're bumping it up. Because, you know, even we don't follow what we do every 2 years without reminders. Nobody else is going to know. So saying it straightforwardly helps.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Roger.
I just say, I think, you know, the focus generally tends to be on what the mayor's getting paid. He's getting a 2.4% increase. Everybody else is the same percentage. I don't know if people will even notice that, but it does. If we put that in the resolution, make it clear what our intentions are going forward.
Yeah, I don't have any problem if the mayor has more responsibilities to get paid more. That shouldn't be a problem. I think Elizabeth and Roger, those ideas to increase that city council's percentage of what the mayor's getting is a really simple solution while keeping that same framework. Because that gap, I think that Julie was concerned with earlier, won't get any bigger. It'll be proportional along the way if we keep that formula in place. And 55%, again, I'm not sure how we came up with the 50% of the mayor's salary versus the 55 in the first place or the 60. I can't remember if that was because we did that survey of hours or if it was just maybe more of an arbitrary, like, let's start here. I think 55% or 60% is a fine number to start with, but keep a framework. When I joined the local officers compensation commission, there wasn't a framework at all. It was, and to the fault of no one, but it was just, here's what the salaries were. Here's what other municipalities are paying city council and mayors. And then for new people coming in like myself and like you, Elizabeth, it's kind of like, well, how are you coming up with these? How did you come up with these numbers? And so at least it's a good place to start. And I think it's helped this year. I don't know if everybody else would agree, but I think it's nice to have.
I appreciate the sentiment. However, I did some quick math under the assumption of increasing city council from 50 to 55. This is not going to be exactly right, but it looks like it's about a 11 or 12% pay increase for city council members. And I just think that's personally way over what politically would be acceptable.
I'm sorry, I'm just being kind of math blind. I'm trying to follow this. If we take the same approach as we did 2 years ago, which is to say that the city council members are to be paid no less than 50% of what the mayor's paid, and we give the mayor an increase of 2.4%, are you sure that this means an 11% increase for the city council members?
If we're saying that in addition to the formula, that we are now paying council members 55% of what the mayor makes under this with this cost of living or this increase, but now we're paying 55% instead of 50%. It's that change that is the vast majority of the reason that net compensation to council goes up by that kind of percentage.
roughly
So
like
you're
10% or so.
It looks to me like it's about 0.88. I mean, like 8.88%, I think. If we do a 2.4% increase to the 47,452.63, which was the 2021 compensation. I don't know, everybody should be doing this math along with me so that I'm not the only one, but it looked like then that if you divide that number in half, I mean, not in half, but if you take 55% of that number and then divide the 2021 compensation by that number, I come up with 0.8878162. But maybe that's wrong.
It would
Yeah.
need.
I got 10% on my end, but I just did the difference. So I did 55% of the mayor's salary in 2021 was $26,098.95 versus what it's at right now at $23,726.32. I think that difference divided by the $23,726.32, and I got 10%.
That sounds right, actually. I think because I was using I used one of the wrong numbers.
But it's close enough, right? I think to the earlier point that it's a much bigger increase. My question is, as far as the political, the politics of it, do you think that the city council would just see that then and flat out just reject it because they don't think it's politically feasible? And should we as a commission be taking that into account? And I'm not saying that we should or we shouldn't necessarily, but is that just something that our commission is supposed to be, factoring into our decision? I don't know, maybe you could talk on that, Chris.
There's no parameters really.
Okay.
As far as I can tell, you can consider whatever you want.
Yeah, I think that we pitch and they either catch or they throw it away. It's up to them. It's a two-part thing. In a way, we're fail safe because if they don't like it, they can vote it down. The numbers do make a difference though. Maybe something a little less than 55%, but Eddie, you'd asked about this before. We picked 50% because it was already clear that we were approaching something that wasn't so far away from a 1/3. And we wanted to make sure that the city council members didn't continue to be left in the dust because we were applying a pure percentage scale. So I could go with sticking with the 50%. I could go with increasing it if 55% comes out to be too high an increase for people's appetites. We could go with less. I'd kind of like to increase it from 50% just because even though we do not bind future commissions, I like the fact that we've got a bit of a pattern here and people can see where we're going. So I'd be open to 55. I'd be open to a little less than 55. I would say we do need to stick with no less than 50%.
I could definitely support 55. I know that it comes out to 10%, but I think that if the city council members, I don't think they should feel like it is not politically feasible to accept because it's a really hard job and maybe that isn't clear to everyone. It certainly is clear to me. When you have people on average spending 30 hours a week, giving them 55% of the mayor's salary doesn't seem like it's too much.
Chris, can you clarify if council were to reject our recommendation or take up action on it, does that mean they would get 0% for the next 2 years?
Stays the same.
So it would just stay the same. That's the risk. Is that we actually
it would
cut
say
off our
the
nose
same
to spite our face.
Yeah, you're saying it would stay the same as what we have in that draft resolution, or what we had before.
Yeah, the current FY22 salaries.
You know, and I wouldn't couch it as risk exactly. I suppose if you were going to think of it in terms of risk, you know, our credibility might be a little bit in the tank, but you know, this is the way it's supposed to work. If we feel that, you know, if we feel that we can endorse a recommendation and they feel, well, that's nice, but we don't need it, that's the way it's supposed to work.
Commissioner Weiner, do you think that it would be more palatable for it to be if we did a smaller step up, maybe a 53% instead of a 55?
Potentially. You know, the other thing that troubles me a little bit, and you know, I know any percentage that we set, even when we, you know, approve the 50% of what the mayor makes, someone could argue, well, on what are you basing that, right? So any percentage we would select could raise questions about, well, why did you choose 52.5 or why did you choose 55%, right? And there really is no solid answer. There's no methodology. There's not a formula like we have with the CPI and the non-union compensation. That's one of the reasons I like the kind of where we're at. We've made the precedent with the 50%. We've made the precedent with the combination of the two formulas to come up with the annual escalator. That's where I kind of come down thinking we are in a decent place with a structure that is defensible. There's precedent for it. So that's why my inclination, and to recognize the current inflationary pressures, to just use the 1 year instead of the 2 year average, at least boost it to 4.2 for the upcoming 2 year period. I guess that's where I end up coming down, is that I like the structure of where we're at, like the precedent of the 50%. I just, and politically, I think it's that's an increase that would, I think by most objective people looking at it would say that's a reasonable increase to be providing. So it passes the kind of the smell test of this. Yeah, this seems like a reasonable number to be at, and a process by which we determine that increase.
So really what it comes down to is, do we keep the structure of a system that we have sort of put together over the last 4 years that's kind of working, it's limping along, at least does better than what we had before, versus address what is an issue that we all recognize, which is the gap between the mayor and the remainder of the city council people. It's certainly true that if we put in our resolution that we're going to go, we'll just pick a number, 55%, that it's for the purpose of narrowing the disparity, because the council recognizes that the work that each of these city council people puts in is enormous. It's definitely beyond what any part-time job calls for. So that's really what we're kind of risking, if you will, is we're saying we like what we've done so far, but there's still this additional thing that we want to do, this sense of fairness, equity, parity, whatever. So this is the direction we want to go in. And that's kind of where we're sticking out our necks, so to speak. Mm-hmm. I don't mind doing it. But I understand your position.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we went back and kind of did the mayor's salary based on looking at those other cities and townships, right? And like who was part-time and not. But to your point, Commissioner Weinert, is that 50%, what's other than we want to close the gap, like Julie said, how are we coming up with 53, 55, 60, right? Other than that particular reason, I totally understand that point as well. I think if you say the reason is to just close the gap, that's one thing, right? And go with it. But kind of an arbitrary pick at this point, right? Because if you're looking at 55% of the mayor's salary, that's like a 10% increase. If you look at 53%, that's like a 6% increase. So what's the objective, I guess? And maybe as a commission, we just need to say what our objective is.
So one weakness that I see in terms of buttressing our support for closing the gap, and I'm not really talking about closing the gap, but just minimizing the disparity, is that 2 years ago when we did solicit this information, I don't want to say it was done on the fly. It's more the case that every time that you ask city council people what their estimates are of people, somebody like Chris sends out emails and half answer them and half don't ever, or, a quarter of them answer late. And they're, again, in my estimation, they were all underestimates, but at least we had some data kind of on the fly to work with when we set that 50% mark. And it was in recognition that they were working so hard. We don't have that data at this point. Now, we could hope, we could, if we wanted to, ask for that data again, if only because we have a lot of new city council people, and it would be interesting to see what their estimates are. That, of course, means that we would continue this meeting after that data had been received and then make a decision at that point. I don't know from a practical standpoint how much burden that would be on you, Chris, especially since we would certainly ask that with less than 45 days before the end of the year, that you not only send out these emails, but chase people down, which means assigning people to NAG.
Yeah, I can certainly do it. I have the kind of the template from last time. I can dig that up.
Because certainly I do not want, as I think about it, if we're trying to make a case for making more than 50%, okay, it doesn't help to rely on the data from 2 years ago, even if it were identical to what we received today from the current city council members. I would just want to have fresh information and hope that nobody was underestimating as drastically as they were last time. But so that would be a way of sitting on it and thinking about it and seeing if we can get more information. But I guess if a fair question at this point is, if the majority of the commission at this point is not inclined to change from the 50%, then it's not worth going out to make the effort to collect that information. If the majority of the commission is willing to at least consider the possibility of a more than 50% increase to compensate people fairly for the amount of time that they're putting in, then we'd want that information.
So, shall we take a straw vote on whether there's support for keeping the CPI and the formula we've used in the past, but increasing the percentage something above 50%?
I would be willing to do that.
Okay. I would be willing to do that.
I would be willing to do that.
I think I would be willing to do it if we capped it to 53%, only because that's a 6% increase. And if you look at the October CPI year over year, that's 6%. So it does two things. It closes the gap slightly with the mayor's salary, but it doesn't move it any higher than what the current October to October CPI number was for 2021 to 2020 on the October BLS. I think it was 6.2%. So you're not increasing any more than that for this one time, this 1 year. You're closing the gap and then keeping our framework in for years going forward. I would be in support of that. But to go any higher than the 53%, I think that Commissioner Weiner's point, that's probably pushing it without any further data. And I don't think we really need to do that at this point.
I appreciate this. I think we'll end up in the same place. I guess where I'm coming from is, rather than changing that 50% threshold to set it to a formula, and we could choose to say, let's look at what the current CPI is of 6.2% or whatever it is, and approve that 6.2 based on a conscious decision of a formula, in this case, whatever the current CPI is, rather than arbitrarily changing the percentage from 50 to 52.5 or 54.7 to keep it at 50%. But then let's just look at the formula this time, given the inflationary pressure, is to acknowledge the 6.2 or whatever it is, and we're making the decision based on that rather than adjusting the 50%.
Are you suggesting making a 6.2% increase to the city council and making a smaller increase to the mayor?
I guess I'd be suggesting a 6.2 for the mayor, and then council would get, 50% of whatever that ends up being, that number ends up being for the mayor.
So to me, that is not helping us do what we're trying to do, I think, in part, which is I'm hearing other people express that they want to reduce that gap between the city council and the mayor salaries. And I think the only way to do that is to start saying, okay, every year or every 2 years, we are going to look at this and address it and consider a blank increase of that percentage. So be it a 2.5% increase or a 2% increase or a 3% increase, whatever it is that we come up with today. Maybe it's just something that we have for the future for other people. I mean, if some of us aren't here, or if the commission changes, maybe we have that in the minutes so we can look back and say, okay, that's part of what we did. That's what we decided. We decided that we would start considering every time we meet to make that gradual increase.
And I appreciate that. I guess my question would then be, what's the end game? That we eventually get up to, and I understand that the commission will change over time, but to get to 60%, to get to 65%, what are we ultimately trying to achieve here, other than kind of philosophically say, let's get council closer to what the mayor is making?
I'm afraid I have to leave for at least a few minutes to open up my business.
I'm going to have to leave in 5 minutes or so for a meeting commitment I have.
May I ask, we did a straw vote on who would support a percentage increase, at least with conditions. I am hearing less enthusiasm perhaps for gathering information again. Is that correct? Or do we think that might be helpful if we wanted to try and buttress the argument of an increase?
I'm not sure, unless we know what we're going to do with the data, to take the time to collect it. I'm not sure we need to do that unless we have a specific reason for doing it and then using that data to make a decision. If we're just going to collect the data and look at it and kind of just look at it and kind of debate it, I don't know if that takes. I think to Commissioner Minor's point, it's like, more importantly, what's the end goal of closing that gap? Like, do you stop at a certain point, or do you go all the way at some point? And maybe that's what the data that you're looking for, Julie, is going to point you to. But that to some point we can set that maybe idea in our resolution, but those future commissions will have to determine that as well. So my personal preference is not to collect any more data, but maybe to set this idea that Commissioner Minor is saying is, do we have an end goal, an idea of what that might be, and then determine if we're going to do this increase and how much it is.
Okay. I'm fine with that. I just felt, if you're trying to make a stronger case, sometimes it helps to say, yeah, we did this again, and this is what people said. But yeah, it's a lot of work to go to if we're already feeling like we can justify it without. I mean, considering the numbers that we're dealing with, I don't know how strong a case we need to make. People will either like the recommendation or they won't. So I'm fine with that. So do we think we can make a decision today, or is this something that, given the time constraints, we should come back and do another session?
I guess I would appreciate, since I have to leave very shortly here, and maybe to just give us a little time to just think about all the issues that have been raised today. And then maybe Chris, as staff, if you could at least do some calculations on if we did increase the relative percentage at 1% increments or something, what the implications of that would be in terms of the overall compensation for the mayor and for council members. So at least we have the kind of the fiscal data to look at as part of this, and just be able to think about it a little bit, come back in a week or so, or maybe right after Thanksgiving, and try to finalize it at that time.
Do that? Would you'd be looking for like between 50 and 55? What each of those would look like?
That would be my sense, unless somebody else wants to push it beyond the 55.
No, 55 is the most anybody's probably going to give us.
Yeah, I mean, I would even say 50 to 53 is probably
adequate, sure.
High enough.
And again, as long as we include in our resolution the explanation for it, you've set forth your basis.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would suggest somebody work on a draft of that for circulation for next time, so that we could have that if that was the way you wanted to go. The rationale, that is.
Sure.
All right, I need to go. I apologize. I don't know, Chris, if you can maybe just do a follow-up, a doodle or something, even today, to get our next meeting scheduled, if that can work for folks.
Yeah, is after Thanksgiving what people are?
Sure. That would be the first week of December, right?
Yeah, I'll look there. Is anybody not able to make?
I guess we have the November 29th and 30th. That's Monday and Tuesday. Yeah. Well, this is urgent. So is Roger going to be surprised when he finds out that the meeting's over?
You folks are welcome to stay on. I need to go.
So can we do a motion to postpone to the next meeting, please?
So moved.
I second. Oops, Elizabeth, you're muted.
Sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Do we have enough?
Oh, do we have enough people?
Yep, we've got 4.
Yep, we do.
Okay, and then communications. Anybody have any communications?
Not I.
No.
And so then we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Yeah, I think we second. If not, I second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I think we did this, but okay.
The meeting is adjourned.
Okay, thank you all.
Hey, good conversation,
Everybody.
people. I appreciate it.
All right, take
Thank
care.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.